So I'm going to touch on specific examples from West Ketchum and Warm Springs, specifically focused in the medium density residential land use category. Staff did provide a presentations focused on residential densities that has more examples in neighborhoods at the February joint work session. And also we also presented at April 8th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So we're going to look at what existing zoning permits, what the 2014 plan says and what the proposed 2025 plan says, and take a look at developments and densities of those existing developments. So the medium density residential kind of equates to our general residential or GRL zone district. So what the GRL currently permits is single family, multifamily with a maximum of 2 dwelling units, and the density range is 5 to 11 dwelling units per acre. The 2014 plan doesn't describe a density for the medium density residential land use category, but it states that uses include single family and duplex. And what's proposed in the 2025 comprehensive plan is, again, multifamily and single family use. A density of 6 it says density should generally be 6 dwelling units per acre, and the density up to 18 dwelling units per acre is may be permitted if community housing is the primary use and the proposed development is contextually appropriate and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So we'll take a look at West Ketchum. So here's the future land use map for West Ketchum. Again, we're looking at the orange area, the medium density residential area in these examples, and these areas are currently in that GRL zone. So here are 4 examples of existing developments that are proposed to be designated as MDR and are in the GRL zone. And we see a range of different housing types and densities. So we've got duplexes and multifamily, and these examples range from a density of 9 dwelling units per acre to 20 dwelling units per acre. And again, in what's proposed is that the density is generally 6 dwelling units per acre and then up to 18 if community housing is the primary use. Here are additional examples, again, in the area that's proposed to be designated as MDR and that are currently within the West Ketchum neighborhood. So we have recent developments, these 2 in the middle, West Cliff Townhomes and West Ketchum Residences. West Ketchum is 9 dwelling units per acre. West Cliff Townhomes is 10 dwelling units per acre. These developments replaced what was the Bavarian Village Apartments, which was 18 dwelling units per acre. It was more dense. And then we also have another recent development here. That's the Snowbird Townhomes. It's comprised of 4 detached townhome units, and it's at 9 dwelling units per acre. So again, these examples kind of illustrate that we have existing developments in the West Ketchum neighborhood that are within that range of 6 to 18 dwelling units per acre. So now we're going to look at what's currently permitted and what the 2025 comprehensive plan contemplates for the future. So in the West Ketchum neighborhood, there's a vacant lot at 300 Sabala Street. It's just over 10,000 square feet. So what's currently allowed per zoning is 1 single family residence or a multifamily development with a maximum of 2 residential units. So if this were to be developed with 1 single family residence, the density would be 5 dwelling units per acre. If it were to be developed with 2, the density would be 11 dwelling units per acre. The maximum height is 35 feet, and the maximum size could range between 7,000 to 10,600 square feet. So what the comprehensive plan proposes is that at 18 dwelling units per acre, that would equate to 4 residential units on this vacant lot. And that would include 2 community housing units. Again, that 18 dwelling units per acre is only if community housing is the primary use. And again, as Morgan touched on earlier, that would be accommodated within the same size building as currently permitted today. So 35 feet in height, and again, 7,000 to 10,600 square feet in building size. And here's an example of a similarly sized lot, a little larger, in West Ketchum that's developed with 4 dwelling units. These are 2 detached duplexes all on the same lot. So that's an example of what could be developed in the future based on that 18 dwelling unit per acre with community housing as the primary use if 2 of these units were community housing units. So now we'll shift over to the Mid-Warm Springs neighborhood. And so here's a section of that neighborhood. And again, we're focusing in the orange in the medium density residential area. So here are 4 examples of existing developments that range in housing type and density. Again, the GRL, where these are zoned, permits 5 to 11 dwelling units per acre. And in MDR, it's the base density is contemplated at 6 dwelling units per acre. So we have a single family home at the right hand of the screen, that's 5 dwelling units per acre. And then duplexes that go all the way up to 12 dwelling units per acre. One of our council members requested that we take a specific look at Short Swing Lane. We've gotten a fair amount of public comment from folks in this neighborhood. So to the right is a map of it's Warm Springs subdivision number 3. And you can see the yellow is single family home, blue are duplexes. There's 3 vacant lots. And then the map also shows the density per lot based on the existing development on that lot. And the density for the entirety of this subdivision here along Short Swing Lane is 6.4 dwelling units per acre, which again aligns with that 6 dwelling units per acre that's proposed as that base density in the medium density residential future land use category. So here's an example of this is a vacant lot along in that Short Swing Lane neighborhood. This lot is just over 8,500 square feet. So what's currently permitted today based on the GRL zoning at 1 residence at 5 dwelling units per acre, 2 residences would be 11 dwelling units per acre, height of a maximum of 35 feet. And that building size would range from 6,000 to 9,000 square feet max. And what's proposed with 18 dwelling units per acre, if community housing is the primary use on this particular lot, it would be 3 residences, which would include 1 community housing unit, again, in the same size building as currently permitted per zoning. So again, there would be no change in the maximum height or the building size for what's being proposed.
Can I ask a quick question? So if you have a 3 residences, 1 community housing unit, but then you say community housing is the primary purpose, it seems like that's a third of it.
That's the way the comp plan is written is that that's for the increase in density. So whatever you have increase above the base is that would need to be the community housing.
And so here is an example of a similar, or a slightly smaller size lot with an existing triplex in the Mid-Warm Springs area to give kind of an example of what that might look like. So the commission spent a fair amount of time deliberating on this particular area of the Mid-Warm Springs neighborhood in their public hearings on the comprehensive plan. There's a mixture of medium density residential and high density residential future land use designation. The MDR is in orange and the HDR is in that more reddish brown color. And the commission recommended adding a policy related to implementing wildlife-friendly development in this particular area. It's the Mid-Warm Springs Heidelberg neighborhood. It's particularly important for big game habitat. So the commission recommended adding language related to having wildlife-friendly development in this area. The commission also recommended adding policy related to incorporating transition areas when we see different transitions to different land use designations. Here we see on the West Canyon Run, the yellow is low density residential. Then we go to medium density residential in orange, and then medium density residential to high density residential. These transitions also could be between residential or commercial uses, like LI and residential. And the language that they recommended adding was related to incorporating a transition area to create a buffer between different intensities and types of uses. So that could be accommodated through either landscaping or kind of diminishing and scaling back the building along the building edge adjacent to that transition zone. And so the next slides, we'll take a look at the densities of some of these existing developments that are in HDR in this particular neighborhood. So Four Seasons is 26 dwelling units per acre. Pine Ridge is 17 dwelling units per acre. And the Fields is 19 dwelling units per acre. So again, these developments are what's currently developed in this HDR area in this mid-Warm Springs neighborhood. At the last public hearing with the City Council, there were some questions related to the Warm Springs Ranch Residences subdivision. So this, the entirety of the subdivision is outlined in blue here, and it's been designated as low-density residential. It was rezoned from tourist to GRL. And the development agreement states that 35 single-family residential lots, or that the 35 lots are permitted to be developed with single-family residences. But there's a section in the development agreement pertaining to lots 32 through 35, and those are highlighted in the black hatch marks in the map. And it states that owners shall have the right to develop lots 32 through 35 for deed-restricted multifamily units consistent with the GRL zone development standards. So currently, again, it's designated as it's been designated as LDR, but we could contemplate a change based on that language in the development agreement if the council so chooses. So we'll move on from the residential neighborhoods to the retail core of our downtown. So the 2025 comp plan says that the retail core, which is the area in red in the map to the right, is intended to feel separate and distinct and have a lower intensity and scale of development than the remainder of the downtown. The comp plan, version 2 of the comp plan says that height in the retail core should be up to 2 stories, but 3 stories may be allowed with shorter floor to ceiling heights. And there's also language and policies related to preserving the Ketchum town site lots and limiting consolidations to preserve that historic rhythm and cadence of development in that retail core area. So the council at the last public hearing asked staff to kind of delve into the difference between density and the scale and intensity of development. Morgan touched on this earlier in the presentation, that density alone does not dictate the size and scale of a building. And so what we have here are 4 examples of existing developments in our retail core with their height, FAR, and density. So taking just 2 of these examples, 5th and Main and the building at Walnut and 4th, both of these buildings are mixed-use buildings on consolidated Ketchum town site lots. While both are 42 feet in height, but 5th and Main has a 3 stories and Walnut and 4th has 2 stories. They appear similar in size and scale, but 5th and Main has 32 dwelling units per acre and Walnut and 4th has 11 dwelling units per acre. And then Mountain West, we have kind of a different style of building with a flat roof. That's at 3 stories, again, 2.21 FAR, and this density is 36 dwelling units per acre. And this is on a consolidated Ketchum town site lot, the consolidated 2 Ketchum town site lots. And then moving into the mixed use, community mixed use area. Again, so we have the lofts at 660 to the left, and then the furthest to the right as the residences at 120. These are residential projects that are on single Ketchum Town site lots. Lofts at 660, it equates to 63 dwelling units per acre. Residences at 120 is 55 dwelling units per acre, and both are 39 feet in height and just over 2.0 FAR. And then we have the first and fourth mixed-use building that's on a consolidated lot, and it's 3 stories in height, and just under 2.0 FAR, and has a density of 55 dwelling units per acre. So again, density does not dictate the size and scale of a building, and we can have a variety of densities, and the scale of the buildings are dictated not just by density or number of floors, but by setbacks and different kind of roof designs. There's a lot of different factors that impact the size, the visual appearance of building mass and scale. So the commission recommended revising the language related to, oops, sorry about that, revising the language related to height in the retail core to state that up to 3 stories may be allowed. However, 3 stories may be permitted pursuant to design standards and guidelines, because there are more ways than just reducing floor to ceiling heights to reduce the perceived height of a building, as we could see through some of those examples. And the commission felt that thinking about the different kind of design treatments, like a 3rd floor setback or different other design treatments that could be done to kind of reduce perceived scale and mass, was more appropriate for the code discussion. So for the mixed-use industrial area, I just have a brief overview for what the plan says. So it acknowledges kind of the importance of, maintaining and supporting businesses in the light industrial area for industrial and commercial uses, while introducing additional residential to the area with guardrails. It also speaks to proactively enforcing the illegal use of commercial properties for personal storage in the light industrial. That's a current issue, and it addresses proactively enforcing that. It also speaks to introducing neighborhood serving commercial uses for employees and residences of the area. There's no change in height from what's currently permitted in the light industrial zones. And other action items outlines are evaluating the parking requirements and ground floor commercial requirements for 100% community housing developments.